Vesper Outpost was not the kind of place Roland wanted to die in. He knew this job would be his last, but he didn't think it would end this way, with every member of his crew now laying dead beside him on the floor of the vault they had been sent to rob. He felt foolish. The double cross seemed glaringly obvious now, but hindsight is the privilege of the living, and he'd be leaving their ranks pretty soon. If he survived his injuries, his O2 wouldn't last much longer. Either way, his time was up. He wasn't a man of faith. There was little Roland believed in outside his own self-preservation, but he could now see the appeal. As he began to mutter a few words of valediction, he was distracted by some movement across the room. It was Becker, one of the hired guns he picked up at the anchorage. Becker was sitting upright, which was an unexpected development, seeing as he had been shot through the chest hours earlier. He turned his head. The glass of his helmet had shattered and was misted with blood. Becker was very much dead, but was now standing up, his eyes opened with a greyish-blue glow. "Well," said Roland, "that ain't something you see every day." The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. Now, last episode we left Archer searching for answers aboard the wreck of the Creation, and after a fatal run-in with some Bannersworn, we uncovered some dark secrets about the fate of both the Creation and its sister ship, the Redemption. And now that's all well and good. And, very interesting from a story point of view, but the Creation is very much about to explode with Archer in it. So, what are we going to do? So, I think the red emergency lights have come on and alarms have started to kind of blare, and I think that the ship's been here for so long, the alarm's kind of warped and distorted. This kind of super ominous screech. And Archer, he needs to focus quickly and get off the ship. So what we're going to do, we're still on the bridge, and there's kind of frequent rumbles echoing through the ship as the small explosions begin to kind of tear apart the hull. The unstable chemical containment unit that we discovered, that was back in the research part of the ship. And according to the message we saw flash up on the dashboard, it was the engines about to blow. And there at the back of the ship, let's say there's 6 huge kind of cylindrical engines that propel this vessel, and each one is probably 3 or 4 times bigger than the Eclipse, like my own ship, but they're huge engines. And that unstable chemical containment unit blowing has kind of caused a chain reaction that's now working its way backwards towards the engine. Backwards towards the engines, which is not ideal. So what we're going to do, now there's a big glass window. We established that looks across the bow, but it's like the windscreen of the ship is built to withstand the vacuum of space and traveling at high speeds. So what am I going to do? Throw a chair through it? That's not an option. And if I go back the exact way I came, I'm going to have to go through the research department, which doesn't exist anymore because it blew up. And I imagine it's probably got a more open plan kind of layout since the last time I was there. And moving backwards towards a chain reaction seems like a rash thing to do. So how am I going to get out of this? I am in the ship's log, aren't I? That's where I was reading about the fate of the Creation and the Redemption last episode. So what if I ask it if there's any escape pods? What's the probability there's escape pods left? Should we ask the Oracle? Let's ask the Oracle. How likely is it? Now, some people would have gotten off the ship, right? So we established the crew were the bad guys of the Creation. They shot the Redemption down, and they were trying to quell this uprising. So they wouldn't have tried to escape, but could some of the missionaries have tried to escape? The ones that were kind of fighting back against the crew? Maybe. Should we say 50-50? I like 50-50 odds. So let's ask the Oracle. Are there any escape pods left on the ship? Yes. Okay, so there's escape pods left. Where are they? So I think Barlow's like kind of tapping furiously on the keypad. The sirens are still deafening and kind of brings up a schematic. So where are these pods at? Let's see. Should we ask, if we look at the derelicts zone oracle, which we use to generate the parts of the ship, I think we can maybe roll and find out where they are. Okay, 39 is living. So that makes sense. I guess I didn't see them in the living quarters, but let's say they're on the other side of the living quarters. Yeah, so if you remember, but there was like a kind of maze of corridors that I got lost in. Maybe it's in there. So yeah, the escape pod bay, I guess, is in and around that maze of corridors that we were working our way through between research and the living quarters. Let's say that. Okay, that gives us a fighting chance of finding them. So Barlow just goes. He just sets off. And I think we're going to have to make a move for this. Now, looking at the list, I think that we're going to make the move called set a course, which is something you'd normally make when you're traveling along a known route in space. But the move actually reads, when you follow a known route through perilous space, across hazardous terrain, or within a mysterious site, roll plus supply. Now, this is a known route, more or less, because we've kind of been through here once before. And the terrain is both hazardous and the site is also mysterious. So we're just going to go with this and make this move. My supply is 5. I'm not 100% sure this is the right move for this situation, but we're about to blow up, so let's just do it. So roll it up. Okay, weak hit. So weak hit says, you arrive but face a cost or complication. Okay, so Archer is able to move a bit quicker this time because the front end of the ship is now kind of pointing skyward, so this is all downhill for him. He crosses the bridge, the data bank, secure in his satchel, and kind of exits out into engineering onto the catwalks where he kind of moves down, descends to the floor and amongst the machines, and kind of revisits the grim scene of his fight with the Bannersworn. And I think when he's down on the floor, there's screens kind of around him that are still trying their best to stay on, and you can see just big warning signs flashing everywhere saying like critical, evacuate, failure, and combinations of those 3 words just on every screen. And the sirens continue to wail, and he's staggered by another explosion as he ascends up the catwalk on the other side of engineering and kind of up and out. And then I hit my first corridor, which is kind of like on a Dutch angle, and it's difficult to stay upright, and there's sparks raining down from above, and another blast rocks the ship, and it's confusing. The emergency red lights are on. It's hard to get my bearings. But Barlow makes it through a set of kind of half-open, kind of heavy doors, and he falls to the floor, and he turns to see that warning that he saw scrawled on the doors behind him, and he realizes that he's back in the living quarters again. But that's kind of hard to tell, as it's taken a real battering since the last time he was here. It's all the furniture is kind of slid across the room to one side, and that's the direction he just needs to keep moving in. So keep moving down, keep going. And he's in the corridors, and he's faced with so many options, like junctions lead to more junctions, and it's hard to make out the signs in the dark, and these kind of jets of steam blasting at him from out of the pipework, and he can feel the heat start to grow with every step, which I guess means he's moving in the right direction towards the raging inferno. So yeah, he's moving quicker, trying to follow the slope of the ship, and that's where he finds it. He finds the escape pod bay. But we rolled a weak hit on this. So what's the weak hit say? So it says suffer costs en route, so make a suffer move, or face complications at the destination and vision what you encounter. So I guess we're going to face a complication here. So what shall we envision? Let's say there's 1 remaining escape pod in this bay out of, say, like 5 or 6. And it's just a corridor with doors to the escape pods on the left. It's kind of sliding doors. And let's say that the corridor continuing on is like completely trashed. So these few pod bays are my only shot to get off. And let's say all of them have been launched except 1. Now the power's still on, and the screens that detail the status of each pod are kind of flashing up kind of intermittently. So like most of them will say launched. And the corridor still has power. They say launched on the screen. And there's 1 remaining unlaunched pod, which is kind of lifeless. There's just nothing doing. Nothing on the screen, no lights, nothing. So another explosion kind of shakes Archer to the floor and kind of gets up to his feet. And I guess we're going to have to just see if we can get this thing working. I don't really have any option other than to try and repair this escape pod. and my eggs are all very much in this basket. So first I'm going to try and quickly diagnose the problem the best I can. Archer is not a mechanic at all, but he's very technically minded, and he manages to keep the Eclipse in the air. So let's try and make the move, secure an advantage to try and get to the bottom of this quite quickly. So let's roll it up. Okay, weak hit. So take +1 on my next move. So I think the problem is fairly obvious. I think it's just kind of shorted out in the blast. It needs to be hot wired. It just needs a bit of power and we can launch. So I kind of use my staff to jimmy open the doors and force myself through when there's a narrow enough opening and kind of enter the pod. It's a small circular pod built for 2 people maybe. Yeah, 2 people with their seats facing each other. And the door has kind of like a glass panel on it you can see through, and which currently is just out to the corridor. And the door like closes behind him, and Archer rips open this access panel and starts kind of going at the wiring, pulling out these kind of handfuls of spaghetti wiring, looking for the right set of wires, and he's kind of being buffeted about by the explosions, which are getting bigger and more intense. And so now let's make the repair move. The repair move is normally reserved for like fixing your own ship or equipment, but I think it's totally appropriate here. And there's some conditions listed about the circumstances under which you're carrying out the repairs. And I think that even though I'm not technically under fire, I think these are just about the worst conditions I could possibly be doing these repairs under. So to get the repair points I need to fix this, I need a strong hit. But it's against wits, which is my strongest suit, and I've got +1 from the secure an advantage. So I've also got big momentum to burn if I need it. So what on earth could possibly go wrong? Okay, let's roll it. Okay, strong hit. That's 2 repair points, which fixes the thing with a malfunction or complication. Now, I could spend some supply to bump that up to 3 points, but I think this is such a quick job that I don't think it makes narrative sense to do that. So I will just deal with the complication later, which, yeah, is the fix it in post of this game, I guess. So yeah, I find the wires I'm looking for, and I pull away the casing and kind of grab some pliers from my satchel and snip and twist and get a bit of tape, and they spark between my fingers, and the screens all come to life. The doors are kind of lock closed behind me, and I can feel the pod start to power up. And there's a glass case with the launch button behind it on the wall and between the 2 seats, and I kind of put my elbow through it and smash the button with the heel of my hand, and the screen flashes up a 5-second countdown. So Archer jumps into the seat and starts to strap himself in as the countdown on the screen starts, and that's when the first of the 6 engines blows, and it's by far the biggest explosion. And then another second goes down on my countdown, and we're at 3, and then another engine blows, and then there's another explosion, and we hit 2 on the countdown, and then 1 flashes up on the screen, and then all of a sudden the view through the glass window in the corridor is just a flash of yellow-orange light. The corridor fills with flames, and Archer feels the propulsion kick in and feels the pod being just pulled upward. But then there's this almighty boom as the last engine goes, and it's the force of that explosion rather than the pod's propulsion that sends it shooting out of the side of the ship. Now, obviously, escape pods are meant to be jettisoned in space, and I've just been shot out of a ship that's crashed. And I think the first thing that strikes me is trees. But the force of the explosion is sufficient that the pod kind of tears through the canopy and is just launched across the jungle. And the force of the trees has kind of spun the pod round, and I can see through the window as we're kind of spinning, and there's this enormous mushroom cloud below. But then I keep spinning and spinning, and the orange glow of the explosion on the creation is replaced with this kind of blur of green and yellow and foliage as I'm being flung across this planet. And there's no controls on this thing, and I did roll up a complication, so I think that maybe there's like an error message on the screen that I can barely see as I'm being shook around and spun. But I'm pretty sure it says like landing systems or whatever, they malfunction, so this is going to be a rough landing. So the pod is hurtling through the air for maybe like 20-30 seconds before I feel it start to drop. I think in space this would be kind of like a serene glide through a kind of like vacuum of space. But this is like anything but. And the pod crashes back through the canopy, smashing through the trees before kind of thudding into the ground, kind of flinging Archer around in his seat. And it's lucky I buckled up, because had I not, I'd be soup right now. So wear your seatbelt, kids. And kind of thud into the ground, and then keep moving. The force of this kind of fall is so kind of immense that I'm being pinballed between the trees and still hurtling forward at immense speeds and spinning on the ground and rolling over and over and over, just a blur of yellow and green and brown through the window as each tree we crash into slows the pod down ever so slightly before finally the pod comes to this grinding stop against something much, much harder, kind of scraping on the outside of the pod. It feels like hard rock. Whew. Well, at least we're off the ship, and I'm taking that as an absolute win. So, where are we now? So, I think Archie's just hanging upside down in the escape pod, just kind of dangling there. I think the pod's the wrong way up. The window, through the window is just mud. So I'm kind of face down, just hanging there. And I think just for a minute or so, Archie's just going to get a little moment of peace and collect himself, because that was rough. That was not the most pleasant journey I've been on. Catapulted in a metal pellet across the jungle. Yeah, that was rough. So I kind of take a minute to recompose myself and de-scramble my brain, and then pop the safety harness and drop down. And because I guess we're face down and it's just mud, I think the escape pod is kind of the wrong way up. So I think Archie has to kind of rock the pod from side to side to kind of use as much of his momentum and as he can to kind of move it the right way up. I guess it's a heavy pod. It's a giant bit of machinery. So he kind of does so after a while, rocking back and forwards, building up his momentum, and then kind of rolls over a little bit, just enough so the doors can then kind of slide open when he hits the release button, and he can kind of squeeze out. But as he does, I think the pod immediately starts to kind of slowly fill up with muddy brown water, and kind of realizes that he's in a bit of a muddy spot. So he kind of slides out of the door as kind of as open as it's going to get, and kind of slides out on his belly into this kind of cold, wet clearing, and he draws his gun, kind of scanning the area. I'm definitely in the jungle. That much is obvious. So I'm in a jungle, and there's trees all around, towering above. They're the same kind of lifeless yellow trees that we've seen nearly exclusively on this side of the mountains. The mountain range, remember, that splits Damu, this planet, in half. This is very different to the other side of the mountain. So we're in the northern hemisphere, where everything's kind of dead and lifeless, and kind of looks back, and you can see the very obvious route that the pod took to get here. It's clearly marked out ahead of him, because the pod has ploughed this huge trench into the wet ground, and she's kind of taken chunks of all the trees, the kind of bases of the trees have got big chunks missing as they slowed the pod down. I think the pod had come to a rest at this kind of rocky rock formation. That's what we're saying. It's just there's this kind of big rock formation behind us that's kind of just jutting out the ground, and maybe it's quite high. Maybe not to the height of the canopy, but kind of close enough. Maybe 15, 20 meters high, maybe. But it's like slick with rain, and the rain is just continuously pouring down from above and kind of churning up the mud around my feet. But other than the rain, there's like literally no sound. It's like deathly quiet, which is ominous, I guess. So let's figure out where we are. So what I'm going to do is I am going to climb this conveniently placed rocky rock formation and maybe get to the top and use it to try and kind of orient myself, try and find out where I am. But mainly what I want to do is figure out like which direction I got launched in, because I've got no idea what side of the ship the escape. I have no idea what side of the ship the escape pods were actually on. So I want to know if I got launched back in the direction of the eclipse, which I've obviously kind of overshot because I've travelled a considerable distance. But did I at least go back in the direction of my ship, or did I get flung in the opposite direction, further away from the eclipse than when I started? So let's ask the Oracle. There's 2 directions, so I think that's just 50-50. Did I launch in the direction of the eclipse? No. Of course I've been launched in the opposite direction. Of course I have. Of course. So that's obviously no good. So can I tell how far away I am? Now, I said I was in the air for like 20, 30 seconds. It was a very big explosion. So I think I've gone quite far, haven't I? I think I was in the air for a while and I was traveling at quite a high speed. So I think, yeah, I've been jumped a considerable distance away from where I need to be. And I think from like up on this rock, I can see the very top of the mushroom cloud as it starts to kind of fall back down, and the smoke, even though the kind of grey curtain of rain that's swept in is kind of obscuring it. And yeah, I'm a long way away from the blast, like several miles away, like hours of trekking, which is, I guess, what I'm going to have to do. So, oh, actually, no. I guess Griff could come and pick me up. He's back in the ship. Shall I try and hail Griff in the eclipse? See if Griff can plug in and come get me? Although it was quite close to the blast, wasn't it? Oh, man. I don't feel like it's very likely the eclipse didn't get in some way caught up in that thermonuclear blast. Okay, so I try and hail Griff on the comms. I get my little kind of doohickey out, and I'm like, Griff? Come in, Griff. Griff? So is there an answer? And I actually don't think this is likely, but maybe I can at least get a status update from my little toaster. I think odds-wise this is not likely, but does Griff respond? No. Okay, so we'll deal with that later. That's a future Archer Barlow problem. But right now, we are deep in the jungle on the wrong side of the planet. And it looks like we're walking out of here, doesn't it? So, this is going to be undertaking an expedition. Now, we don't know this area, and it's the very definition of a journey across hazardous terrain. So let's do that. So first, let's give this expedition a rank. And actually, no. Let's give this a theme. Let's give this location a theme, and that will make this more interesting. Now, themes are a series of oracles that can give a location some kind of consistent flavor. And once you've rolled up a theme, each theme has its own further oracles you can roll on that are specific to it. And kind of we're in a jungle, so some of these won't be appropriate to the setting, but we'll roll up a random theme anyway and see if there's something we can work with. If not, we can re-roll it and find out. So, 50. Okay, 50 is infested. So these themed locations are, I shall remind you, entirely optional. I've just chosen to do this. And I just thought it would add some flavour. So now this jungle is infested flavour. My favourite flavour, infested, yum, amazing. So, yeah, I'm in an infested jungle. Great. So, okay, we'll give this a name and a rank. So we'll traverse the jungle. No, sorry, traverse the infested jungle is the name. And the rank, now I've repeatedly said in the last few episodes that I want things to be straightforward and I don't want to get stuck in places forever and ever. But look where that's got us. It's got us into an infested jungle. So given the nature of it, I don't think it's going to be the easiest. So let's just say dangerous. It's going to be a dangerous expedition through an infested jungle. Now, infested says that foul creatures have overrun this place, but we've established that this jungle is kind of pretty lifeless, so we've got like a bit of a contradiction here. So let's just roll with it, I guess. We'll maybe take the foul creatures part literally, but we'll be flexible on the overrun part. I mean, Barlow, he doesn't know it's infested. He's not privy to these horrible, horrible dice rolls I'm making, but he's currently seen no signs of life yet. So let's get cracking. I think we're going to start this first section of the journey cautiously, as Barlow always does, moving purposely but carefully, keeping his gun ready, scanning the terrain for threats. So let's roll plus wits. Okay, that is a weak hit, so we get to mark progress. yeah, mark progress, but the progress costs you. So we're going to face a peril at the waypoint, envision what we encounter, or suffer costs en route. So I think we're moving through the jungle, kind of following the trench that's been left by the escape pod, and the rain is still kind of hammering down, and it makes moving through the mud of the soft jungle floor kind of fairly hard going. And Barlow keeps his gun drawn and his wits about him. He's remaining vigilant, stopping periodically to observe the surroundings before kind of pressing on. And there's just very little change in the scenery. It's the same kind of endless parade of the same trees. And I'm starting to think that actually the damage I did with the escape pod has really brightened up the place and given it a bit of kind of textural variety at least. But he's walking for maybe like 40 minutes or so before kind of stopping for a break. And this cost us. So now I really want to preserve my momentum and my supply. So why don't we roll a couple of times on the infested oracles and see if we can drum up some good old-fashioned peril. Okay. 6. 6 is corpse of an unfortunate victim. Lovely. So Barlow is moving with purpose through this kind of seemingly endlessly repetitive forest until he's kind of stopped dead in his tracks by this stench. And I think the stench just kind of hits him like a brick wall. And there in front of him on the floor is a creature that is just very hard to identify. There's maybe not a lot of it's left. I guess maybe kind of cow-sized. But yeah, there's not a great deal left to kind of see of it, I guess. It's been picked clean or it's kind of been rotted away by the elements. It's just a mess. There's like a lot of bone. And I think I can make out a jaw, some teeth maybe, horns possibly. But this is long since identifiable as a particular animal. It's just a kind of a mess of bits. So let's roll again. See if we can get a bit of a vibe going. So what else about this scene is rum? Okay, 83 is toxic or sickening environment. Okay. So I think immediately Archer slips his kind of respirator and mask on. And I think that beyond the stench of kind of rotted animal carcass, there's maybe signs of like some other kind of environmental change maybe. I mean, the sight is definitely sickening, but toxic? Maybe there's like kind of discoloration or there's some obvious effect on the foliage around me. Maybe like the bark at the bottom of all the trees has been kind of like stripped away maybe. Or the jungle floor is like withered and kind of dead, like a little contained fallout zone. Everything is kind of dead in this area. Maybe there's not even any kind of flies around the carcass, which is obviously unusual because they love that kind of stuff, don't they? This scene is like completely devoid of life. Yeah, maybe there's like a 10-meter square area that's all just withered up and dead, and the yellow, green vegetation is all just grey and black. And it's like a really striking, noticeable change. And it's pretty gross. So let's get out of here. And I think I'm definitely spooked, and I don't want to hang around and find out kind of what's left that scene behind. I'd rather just move. So I'm definitely going to pick up the pace here and move quickly on the next stage of this expedition. So we're going to move at speed. So roll plus edge. Wow. Okay. That is a miss, and that is a miss with a match. And not only is that a miss with a match, my momentum will not bail me out on this one. Oh dear. That is, and I cannot stress this enough, a very, very bad dice roll. And I've been so good, I've been saving my momentum, and I've been waiting to use it in case I really need it, and this has not worked out. Okay, so what is going to happen? So this is bad. So the move says, on a miss, you are waylaid by a crisis or arrive at a waypoint to confront an immediate hardship or threat. Do not mark progress and pay the price. Right, okay, so what's going to happen here? What is the most obvious negative outcome? No, I don't think there is a particularly obvious negative outcome. So shall we ask the Oracle? Should we roll on the table, the pay the price table? Let's do it. Okay, 41. The environmental terrain introduces a new hazard. Okay, so that's my first problem. What can that be? Okay, so it's been much the same. It's just been trees and trees and trees, nothing particularly different. So, okay, maybe I'm starting to move at a kind of a light jog, and I'm a bit distracted by that kind of macabre scene I've just witnessed and discovered. And I don't really kind of notice as I'm kind of checking back over my shoulder that the trees have started to thin out ahead of me, and before I know it, I'm kind of catching myself as I find myself teetering on the edge of this kind of deep, like not canyon, a gorge, like a deep gorge in front of me. And I almost kind of topple in before I kind of catch myself and stumble back. And I think this is a pretty wide gorge, maybe like 25, 30 meters across, and kind of looking down, the bottom is this churning torrent of brown water, and is there a way? There's got to be a way across. I'm gonna be stuck here forever. So maybe there's like a fallen tree, like a log. That is so contrived. I'm just gonna walk that back. I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's these big kind of rocky pillars, these big pillars of rock or something that kind of form. They're the same height as the gorge edge, so they kind of form these tall stepping stones, kind of jutting out above from the water below. And I think this gorge goes on pretty far in both directions. So I'm probably going to have to cross this gorge via those stones. And also, I think it's too deep. It's deep enough that if I fell from here, I'd probably be very badly hurt, and I would definitely be swept away because the rain is kind of still pounding down. And yeah, so I think I've come to an impassable gorge, and the option to cross it is not the best. So that's our first problem. But this was a roll plus a match, so let's roll up another peril as I kind of start to move towards the pillars of rock and try and cross this gorge. So let's roll up a peril on the infested oracle. 68 says, lured or driven into a trap or dead end. Well, this feels very much like a dead end, but the word lured has me worried. So, am I going to have to roll up a monster? I'm going to have to roll up a monster, aren't I? Something has lured me into a trap or dead end. There's no human population over this side that I know of. And this is infested, so this makes a lot of sense for me to roll up a monster. I'm gonna roll up a monster. Now, those of you who have been with me since session 0 will remember I said words that I knew would probably come back to haunt me. I said there was a very cool system with which you could roll up creatures in this game, and kind of these kind of randomly generated life forms. And I guess we're about to see that in action, because I've been lured to a gorge by some terrible, terrible bastard monster. So maybe as I'm moving along the rim of the gorge and the rain is still hammering down and the footing below is still really muddy, but I'm kind of trying to hustle as quickly as possible towards these stepping stones, and I suddenly become aware of something in my peripheral vision back amongst the trees. So what do I see? Let's dust off the creature oracles. We've got a series of oracles to roll on. But first we're going to establish how big this thing is, what scale it is. Now the biggest of these is planetary scale, so I may re-roll that one. But yeah, let's see what size this monster is. Okay, 55 is medium, person-sized. Okay, person-sized monster, that doesn't feel too bad. Let's figure out its basic form. What kind of creature is it? Now, 12, and we're on land. So this is a beast/mammal. Okay, a person-sized beast/mammal. Okay, let's roll on the first look oracle. See if we can give us a bit more detail on this. When you see a creature for the first time, you roll twice on this. 80. 80 is oversized mouth. Okay, and second roll is 12. Brutish or muscled. So I see a mega-mouthed beast/mammal that is absolutely ripped, just jacked. Okay, so lastly, I'll roll on the encountered behavior oracle. And this will help me take those visual clues and combine them into kind of like a context we can understand. I mean, these details seem scary at first, but this could be like a peaceful grazer or a kind of, a Vegisaurus. Okay, so let's roll on the encountered behavior oracle. 70. Nope. 70 is pack hunter. So there is more of them. There is not just one. There is multiple creatures. So let's figure this out. We've got human-sized and muscled. Now, for some reason, when I think of muscly animals, my first thought is kangaroos. You ever see like a kangaroo face off against like a threat, like someone? They are unbelievably hench. And I think that's just what I thought of first. So that's what we're going with. So these things have this incredibly muscly torso. And I think they have kind of long, thin arms, which they kind of use to walk on all fours like gorillas do, like on the knuckles. But then they can also stand in a kind of bipedal stance. And yeah, maybe they've got these big, powerful back legs that they can use for explosive bursts of speed, and have these long, straight tails that point upwards when they're on all fours, like whip-like tails that they end in a fork. Why not? Let's do that. Now, oversized mouth. Okay, oversized mouth. So maybe the body is like mammalian, I guess, a bit kind of kangaroo human-like. But maybe the heads are like long and flat, a bit like a crocodile, like an alligator, and these kind of powerful head full of big old chompers. And the back end of this thing has this kind of reddy brown fur that runs from its tail all the way up to its shoulders, but then the torso and head are this just kind of grey, muscular flesh. The head and the snout are calloused and hard, and on the top side of their heads are these kind of black, doll-like eyes that are watching me as I stand on the rim of the gorge. Frankly, fucking horrified at the sight of these awful creatures. But yeah, thanks, oracles. So yeah, we established that they're pack hunters, so there's got to be more than one. So this is going to be a real short session and a short season if, there's like 30 of these things. So what are we saying? Should we say, well, there's definitely 2 in the trees, at least 2, that I'm looking at as I approach the pillars. And I don't know, maybe one more is 3. Is 3 enough for you people? Why not? Yeah, let's say 3. So, yeah, maybe this one's been lurking in the gorge. Maybe that's the trap that I've been lured into and kind of forced to this dead end. And yeah, maybe there's one that's been clinging to one of the rock pillars in weight. That's the trap. So yeah, let's go with that. So I'm looking back at the tree line, and there's these 2 kind of terrible, horrifying nightmare creatures just kind of stood watching me as I move along the lip of the gorge. And then suddenly I hear this scraping of claw on rock behind me, and a third one clambers up the column and then leaps backwards and acrobatically turning in midair and thuds down into the mud. And then all 3 of them are on me, kind of really close. I think that's why they're so shredded as well. I think they're climbers. Maybe the other 2 were probably up in the treetops waiting for me, just kind of watching me pick my way through the forest. And so, yeah, I'm in a bit of a pickle. I'm in a real tight spot here. So now they've revealed themselves to me and kind of interacted with me a little bit. I've kind of seen them moving and behaving. I'm going to roll on the final creature oracle, which is the revealed aspect. This will add a last bit of detail to let me know just how much trouble I'm in. Okay, 84 is... oh dear. So 84 is radioactive. So, how does that reveal itself, one wonders? Okay, so maybe they're puffing out their chests and they're snarling their big jaws at me and snapping at me, and I don't know. Is there like some kind of like vent or gill type structure kind of behind their jaws, maybe? Like a weird kind of blowhole thing on either side of their heads. But it's not like a hole, it's like a short, fleshy spout. And like each time they kind of hiss and bare their teeth at me, these little spurts of yellowy, glowing goo vent out of the kind of flesh pipes and hit the ground. And as it hits the ground, it kind of fizzles. And Maybe that's why the kill site was like that. It wasn't toxic; it was radioactive. Yeah, so maybe these beasts had been feasting on that carcass, and as they were doing so, they were excreting nuclear gloop, which just like kills everything around it. This is great. I love this. Okay, so what the fuck is Archer going to do here? Well, I mean, he's got his gun drawn, backs to the gorge. He really has nowhere to go. And he has 3 of these creatures closed in on him. The one that came up from the pillars and the gorge, I think, is directly to his left, let's say, and it's blocking the path to the crossing stones. Now, the other 2 have kind of come down from the tree line, and they're kind of starting to fan out, maybe trying to surround me. The pack hunters, very smart animals, and they're all moving kind of slowly on all 4s, kind of getting ready to pounce with those powerful bat legs. So, kind of maybe 5 meters away, kind of hunched, ready to strike. So what am I going to do? Okay, so Archer is going to have to use his brains here. Think fast. Now, he's been around the galaxy. He's surveyed a lot of planets. He's been around the block a few times. This is not his first rodeo when it comes to hostile creatures. And when I say rodeo, I do not mean I'm going to ride one of these things. Well, that would be cool. So I'm going to just quickly look for a kind of a weakness, an obvious physiological feature that I can kind of exploit and use against them, whatever. So, okay, so I'm going to make the move, secure an advantage again, and it's kind of assessing the situation with expertise and observation. That's his whole deal. So, okay, weak hit. So this all happens very quickly, but I think that from this behavior and by the fact they're pack hunters and they're not too big, they're not kind of monstrously large, I think that maybe individually then they're not that dangerous, which seems to fly in the face of conventional wisdom. But I think maybe if I can split them up or maybe make myself imposing, I might be able to kind of push them back or frighten them off. Or I think, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'm going to see if I've got something in my gear, in my satchel, that can then kind of help. I think it's reasonable to suggest that I'd have like a flare or something. And most animals are scared of fire. So maybe if I can kind of get a flare and light one up, I can push them back, maybe. They give me a chance to cross. So we'll make the move, check your gear. And I take +1 from the weak hit on the last move when I was secured the advantage. So I'm rolling plus supply, which is at the max. And I have +1 too. So, okay. Strong hit. So I have it and I'm ready to act. So take +1 momentum. So I'm up to 9 momentum now, which is great. So, if a decisive moment comes up, I've got that to burn to help me out. So Archer keeps his gun trained on them, kind of flicking between each target as he kind of rummages with his other hand, kind of rummaging around his satchel, and he finds the flare like almost immediately and pulls it out. Kind of rips the top off with his I don't know how you work a flare. He rips the top off with his teeth, which seems dangerous, and sparks it up. And he's kind of holding it out with the gun also outstretched, kind of flicking between each monster. The area around him turns this kind of phosphorescent pinky red and kind of thrusts it towards the nearest beast. And I think this could be a variety of moves, but I think I'm going to settle on face danger. But I think this is something that calls upon kind of like bravery or resolve. So I'm trying to kind of ward them off, because if I start fighting these, I'm going to be torn to shreds. So I'm trying to ward them off. So this is going to be rolling plus heart, which is a weak stat for me. Not that seems to make any difference, because I mess it up when I'm rolling on my strong stats. So yeah, I'm thrusting this flare towards the nearest one, which let's say is the one to my left, the one that came up from the gorge that's standing between me and the stones. That's my only way out of this. So, okay. Weak hit. Okay, so it works, but at a cost. And I think these fellas don't like the flare at all. They're kind of beady little doll eyes, kind of narrow as I kind of push it towards them, and they back away. So I push along the rim of the gorge, kind of holding out the flare of my gun, forcing the nearest one backwards. It goes scrambling in the mud and kind of recoiling from me. But the others then start to move in behind me, and as they get close, I give them the flare, give them a blast of the red light, and kind of push them back as well. And I think my suffer move from the weak hit will be a hit to my supply, maybe. So yeah, maybe I kind of burn through the first flare, and as it starts to die, I kind of throw it at the 2 that are together, and then I go in my satchel and find another one. So yeah, I'll bump my supply down from 5 to 4 to kind of reflect that. And it sparked up the second flare, and holding it out again, area is again kind of covered in this red glow and moving towards the pillars, and they're kind of backing off me. But I don't think these things are stupid at all. I think they know I can't keep producing this magic pink fire indefinitely, so they follow me, but kind of slowly at a distance. They're stalking me. So I'm at the stones now. My back is to the gorge. I think it's probably a short jump to the first one, but it's far enough, and the rocks I think are slippery and wet for this to be a dangerous move. So I drop the flare at the edge of the gorge, and I just take a step back and then launch a running jump at the first column. And this is definitely a face danger with edge because it's agility here. So weak hit. Okay, so I leap into the gorge and my feet land square on the first column, but they like slip away beneath me instantly, which causes me to land flat on my back and knocks the wind right out of me. And the column is fairly wide, this one, I think, so there's no danger of me, or no immediate danger of me falling down into the gorge, but I am kind of dangerously exposed here as the monsters can jump and climb, and the flare on the gorge is that I left, I kind of threw at them, is about to go out. So I think my suffer here is a bit of physical harm, so I'll take -1 to my health. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and shrug this off. This is an optional move that you can do if you're above 0 health, but it's also compulsory if you are at 0 health. But I'm going to try and resist the harm, kind of draw on every bit of strength that Archer has to kind of get up and keep moving. Well, that's a miss. So that's worse than I thought. So, okay, maybe I haven't just had the wind knocked out of me. I think I may have like cracked a rib or something, and kind of pain starts to spread across my chest, and breathing feels hard as I get to my feet and suck in some air, which kind of makes it worse. So I'll take an additional hit to my health, so I'm down to 2 now. But I got to keep moving. The flare is about to go out, and they're starting to sniff it on the rim of the gorge, kind of figuring out that there's nothing to be frightened of. So I think I dropped my last flare on this column that I'm on, and that could just buy me time, even if it just allows me to kind of maybe get a clear shot of them or something. Yeah, kind of maybe hop across the next few stones, which are closer together, and thankfully I don't have to roll for. And yeah, kind of come to a stop at the narrowest column. And I think maybe by now they've started across the stones too, and yeah, they're more agile than me, and they can climb up them as well. So yeah, in my last flare, the one that I left on the first stone is kind of is sputtered out, and they're starting to move, and I'm kind of dangerously exposed here. So I'm gonna leap across these last few columns quickly and get to the other side. So yeah, moving quickly, facing danger plus edge. Strong hit, yes, finally. So I bounce from stone to stone, and each time my foot hits the rock, it shoots this judder of pain up my body and into my rib cage, and causes me to take a sharp intake of breath, which then hurts even more. And I keep going, but I draw on everything I've got to get to the last stone and take one last leap across the final gap, where I land muddied on the other side of the gorge, looking back at my pursuers, who are, I think, maybe halfway across by now. That first flare maybe slowed them down slightly, but they are still coming, and they're moving much easier than I am. So what am I going to do? Is, yeah, again, I just don't think I can fight these things, and I'm in a bad place physically. I'm on 2 health. That could be like 1 hit and I'm done for. So let's do what Archer does. Let's try and think our way out of this. So I wonder if any of the columns, maybe one of the narrower columns, the one that kind of narrow at the base, has like a weakness anywhere. Maybe if I can like a carefully placed shot from my pistol could maybe make it unsteady, cause one to come down, maybe, so they can't get across. Okay, so let's secure an advantage here. Let's see if we can use our powers of observation to try and find an opening for us to exploit. Okay, strong hit, yes. Right, we're maxed out on momentum, and we take +1 to our next move. So yeah, okay, so one of the pillars, kind of 2/3 of the way across, is much, much narrower at the base. And maybe as I was hopping across, I kind of felt that one being slightly less steady as I moved across it, more kind of precarious. Yeah, so I see that the years of water flowing through this gorge has weakened this one pillar. It's in 2/3 of the way along the row. And yes, I think it's quite significantly weakened. And yeah, maybe if I can just, squeeze off a few shots, I can maybe damage it and yeah, maybe the weight of the beasts will cause it to topple. So I've had a little look, and there's no specific move for just taking like a one-off pot shot or something like that. I mean, it could be face danger, but what I think I'm going to do here, having had a break and looked over these moves, is I'm going to use the battle move. And the battle move is something you want to do if you like want to condense a fight into like one roll, kind of like a highlight reel of the fight. You just kind of roll one dice, but you envision how it pans out. So what I'm going to do is say that Archer Barlow is laying on the relative safety of the kind of the other side of the gorge, and he's on his front in the mud, kind of wheezing from the blow to his ribs. And he looks back across the gorge with the rain still pounding down on him, and the water below kind of roaring as these three radioactive creatures that have been hunting him move purposefully across the columns of rock that stretch the span of the gorge. And I think Archer firstly just kind of opens up with his pistol, shooting at the beasts, trying to slow them down, kind of firing a volley of like fizzing laser blasts at them. Maybe he clips one and kind of seems to enrage them, which is what he wants. He wants them to move less carefully. He wants them to start moving onto the columns together and kind of to kind of really try and push across and be less careful, make the columns top heavy, because he's seen a weakness in the rock. And they move, and he waits for his moment. And one of the beasts, the one that's been climbing, I think leaps onto the weakened rock, and it's kind of snarling at Archer. It's kind of maybe about 10 meters away, and another jumps across, lands on top of the column, and then another joins it, which kind of nearly forces them both off. And yeah, the one below is clinging on, trying to clamber into a position where it can leap to the next column, and Archer takes careful aim at the weak point and pulls the trigger. So fighting at range using the environment to your advantage, roll plus edge, and I have +1 to my next move and momentum to burn. That is a strong hit, and I did not have to burn my momentum. So I fire the shot into the rock, which doesn't do much at first, then another, and chunks of this grey-black rock start to kind of fall away as my blasts thud into it, and the creatures are snapping and snarling at me, so I shoot off more and more shots, each one chipping away a bit more rock, and then they make their mistake. They make their move. They all try and move at once, and they use their weight to kind of push off the rock, and it suddenly gives beneath them. It starts to crack and tip away from where I am, and they try and scramble and regain their footing, but it is too late. They scratch and claw at the rock as it begins to fall, and the one that's clinging to the column down below tries to leap, but there's just nothing to push off, and that one's the first to fall, and then the column and the creatures topple backwards towards the other side of the gorge, and the tower of rock crashes into the torrent of water below, taking these foul beasts with it to a damp and deathly end. Well, that was intense. Thank you for watching once again. I absolutely love playing this game, and that session was a great example of just how it goes in directions that you never expect. And yeah, we're once again in a real pickle. Archer is battered up pretty good, having just taken down some radioactive kangaroo crocodile gorillas. But yeah, at least I'm off the ship, right? which was the principal aim at the beginning. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed and liked these videos. Your support means the absolute world to me, and the lovely comments that you've been leaving below have been great to hear, so do keep them coming. Please leave a like and subscribe if you've not done so already, and push the little bell icon to be notified of when the next video drops. I hope you liked this week's Tale from the Drift that opened the episode. Once again, it's a little bit of flash fiction that I write using a few prompts from the oracles, and exciting development, I'm going to open up submissions for Tales from the Drift. So if you have access to the preview edition and want to roll up a bit of flash fiction for me to read at the start of each episode, please do get in touch via the email address that is on the screen now, and I'll let you know the parameters for submissions. Okay, so until next week, farewell and safe passage.